Om. 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 Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragnish Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gaur Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyato, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato ma Satkamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we begin today on verse number 16. Let's chant together. Chaturvidha bhajante mam Jana Sukritinorjuna Arto Jitnya Surartharthi Jnani Cha Bharatarshava. Four kinds of people who have done virtuous deeds worship me, O Arjuna. The distressed person, the aspirant after knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the man of knowledge, O best of Bharatas. So in the earlier verses which we saw last week and earlier was that everything in this world has come from the divine source. And because the cause is always present in the effect, the divine is always present in whatever it is that we experience in the world. For instance, now a wooden chair. So we say, from what is the source of the wooden chair? The primary source of a wooden chair is the wood, right? So even when I see the chair and use it, if I look deeply, then I will see, well, it is wood. That's why I call it a wooden chair. Even if you don't use the adjective wooden, if you say simply chair, but it's still wood. Exactly in the same way, this entire universe, with its, just like when wood takes a certain name and a certain form, it becomes a wooden chair. So similarly, this all-pervading reality, it has taken all these infinite number of forms and infinite number of names. But if you look deeply in a wooden chair, you just see wood. So if you look deeply in all these names and forms, we will just see nothing but the divine. But we are not able to see it right now. So some of these verses which we saw earlier said how we can try to perceive the divine in at least some of the things around us. And then the verses that we saw last week showed how, in spite of the reality being present right in front of us, we still are not able to see it. And the reason was given, of course, was that this is all being covered by a kind of veil, a veil of name and form. Think about it this way. Let's stick to that wooden chair. Whenever you're just seeing it primarily as a chair, you're not necessarily, the wood part of it is not on the topmost part of your consciousness. It's like, it's a chair. It's a chair to sit and to use. Or let's say if you have Or let's say if you have s- gold plates or silver plates and you use it regularly, and so for you, well, it's a plate. But then you decide, well, I need to then get rid of it. I don't want these gold plates anymore. And then you go and sell it to a gold merchant who is willing to buy it. Now, for you, that plate might have a great sentimental value. Oh, it's come down, it's a family heritage, it came down from my great grandfather, and so that plate has a certain value for you because you're seeing it primarily as a family treasure. But when you go to sell it, the person who's buying it, he doesn't care what kind of a treasure it is. As far as that person is concerned, he'll just see what's the weight of the gold and what the cost would be, how much he would have to pay for it. So that person is able to see it's basically gold. While I'm projecting values on it by saying it's a plate and it's precious and so on. Exactly in the same way, um, this whole world is nothing but the divine. Then we have projected values on it by saying, oh, this is a living object, this is a non-living thing. And among the living things, then we have these categories based on this is superior, this is inferior, this is more precious, this is less precious. So all the values that we ascribe to things around are all projected by us. But the reality is that everything is divine. But people are still not able to see it because these projected values are more important to them than the actual substance, the actual source. And then verse 15, which we saw, with which we concluded last week, showed that it's some of these impressions, the wrong ways of thinking that we have acquired in our previous births, that prevents us from seeing reality as it is. So, in fact, there's, if you see last month's Atlantic Monthly, there is this very interesting article on wisdom. It's actually about happiness. Do people become wise automatically as they age? And there is a argument that with age, and it's a whole big subject. I'm probably going to speak on it next month, in the first Sunday of next month. It's called the happiness U curve, and so we will go into it a little bit more detail then. But it's good to know that as we age, clearly some our ways of thinking change, and some kind of maturity does come. Now, that maturity may have a physiological basis, or it could be just that we are learning from the different experiences in life. But we see that while age might bring some amount of learning, people are pretty immature even when they grow old. So it's not something that happens as a default. So unless we make conscious effort to learn as we grow, we may not mature much. And so all of us are already born with certain tendencies, certain ways of thinking, certain ways of doing. And if we don't consciously try to change, and everything doesn't have to be changed, obviously. There are things we do perfectly well, and we don't have to change that. We can actually preserve it, make sure that we don't lose our strengths. But there are certain things we don't do so well. Now, unless I make a conscious effort to change that, I'm just going to remain in the same old rut. And so conscious living, consciously assessing one's strengths and weaknesses is important. Those who don't do it are not able to see, are not able to acquire that deeper clarity of vision by which to perceive the reality behind the world in which we are. Now, but there are a few who do see that. There are a few who do turn toward God. And these four are being described here. So Krishna categorizes those few people who turn toward the source, turn toward God. And he says four kinds of people who have done virtuous deeds, that they come with a good fund of samskaras, you have tried to consciously develop good mental impressions. And he puts these four categories as artha, meaning the distressed person, jidnyasu, the one who seeks knowledge, artharthi, the seeker after wealth, and jnani, the person of knowledge. So let's take them up one by one. One thing common you will see in all these four is that they are not completely happy. They are disappointed in some way. Now, in order for us to turn to spiritual life, some kind of a disappointment is necessary. Now, I'm using the word disappointment, but it should not be mistaken for some kind of a frustration, and that probably doesn't help so much. But if you look at it in a positive way, if I'm completely satisfied with the way things are, if I'm completely satisfied with life, with everything in it, why do I need to seek after anything, let alone God? So there has to be certain amount of dissatisfaction within us in order for us to then strive to do something to overcome that dissatisfaction. You see, therefore, in the Gita, now we are in the 7th chapter, but the first chapter that we studied is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Vishada means disappointment, distress. So the Gita begins, the first chapter is about Arjuna's distress, Arjuna's disappointment. If Arjuna had no doubt, no confusion, he knew exactly what he needed to do, well, the war he would have gone ahead with the fighting and the Gita wouldn't have occurred. So there was a certain point was reached in Arjuna's life when he not only was confused, but he was so distressed by it that he sought guidance from God. God sought guidance from Krishna. So similarly, if we are honest to ourselves, no matter what you tell your friends, and you can say, "Oh, I'm so fine, everything is wonderful." That's okay. That's we don't have to go on advertising our disappointments to everyone. But deep down in our heart, we see that there are a lot of things which are wonderful in our lives. We are very fortunate. But there are also a few things which could have been better. If we acknowledge that there are things which could have been better in our lives, then the next question is, how do I then make them better? Where do I turn to make those things better? And these four people which Krishna describes here are the four who turn towards a spiritual solution. So first, the distressed, artha. Distress means that I'm suffering. I'm not happy with my present state. And that distress can come through fear, anxiety, thieves, terrorists, any kind of fears really. In olden days, they had to travel in forests. They were afraid of wild animals. Today we were not so afraid of wild animals. They're all locked up safely in zoos. But I think there are wild people. There are people who sometimes behave worse than animals. You see what happened recently in France. What happened to those people is not, the end result was not very different from what may have happened to the people in Jurassic Park with the T-Rex coming. Essentially, it's a threat to your life, to injury, to even death. So the fear that can come and the suffering that is caused as a result of it, and to illness, to disease, all such people will come under distressed, the first category. Now, everyone is distressed for something or the other. But does everyone turn to God as a possible solution, as someone that I need to turn to God to help remove this suffering? Not all do, but those few, and that's why it is said, who have done virtuous deeds. By virtuous deeds, it means we have born with a certain tendency, certain ways of thinking by which we feel that in order for me to overcome my suffering, the best person I can approach, the best source I can go to is the divine source. So that's the first category of people who turn to God. So they are suffering and they turn to God for help. The second, jidnyasu, aspirant after knowledge. So many of us might, who have this great desire to know, to understand, and then we look around the world around us, and there are a few things we understand pretty well, the area of your specialization, the field in which you have done some research or study, you know a lot about those things. But there are a lot other things we don't know. And some people don't know and they don't care. But there are some people who don't know and they say, no, I need to know. I just can't rest until I find an answer to this. And if you go to a library, it can be either a humbling experience or a frustrating experience when you see hundreds of volumes on those stacks in the shelves. And then it can be humbling in the sense you recognize, well, how little I know, how much has been written, how much has been studied, how much fund of knowledge is there in this world, and how little I know. So it can be humbling, but it can also be frustrating. It's like, well, I'm never going to be able to read all these books. I'm never going to be able to know all these things. And so where do we turn to in order for our doubts to be solved, our questions to be answered? And so some people say, let me go to the source of all knowledge. So some people turn to God in order to find answers to questions we have regarding life, questions we have regarding our own existence. Third, seeker after wealth. Artha arthi. Arthi means one who wants. Artha means anything that makes my life meaningful. So literally, it's like seeking things that make my life meaningful. And all of us are seeking things that make our lives meaningful, but what thing will make my life meaningful will vary from person to person. For some people say, well, if I get a new iPhone, that will really bring greater meaning to my life. And so then they will seek after ways to acquire that. So since we have different ideas about what things will enrich my life, what things will make my life more meaningful, we seek after different things. Now, I may want these different things, but I may not necessarily turn to the divine source for it. And even the divine is sometimes helpless. As it is said that one person used to pray to God, say, oh God, please bless me that I may win the lottery. Please see that I win the lottery. And pray as a real great devotion towards God. And finally, it appears God appeared before him and said, I really can't help you. If you want me to help you, you must at least buy the lottery ticket first. So there has to be something has to be done from our side. But at least this person, rather than going and breaking some law or doing some immoral or illegal, unethical way of making millions, with at least praying to God, which is good. That at least this person knows that if there's one being who can definitely help me, it's God. So that's one who is seeker after wealth. But here by wealth, as I said, it means really anything that I feel will enrich me, will make my life more meaningful. And finally, the man of knowledge. Now by man of knowledge here does not mean an enlightened being. Because why would an enlightened being then seek after God? An enlightened being is who actually has attained God. So there is no reason why an enlightened being become a seeker. So when it is said a man of knowledge, it really means man, someone, again, man is not like man, it's just a human being. It's a little older translation. A person who knows the truth but has not experienced it yet. So, in some respects, all of us here, we are people of knowledge because, well, we have been studying the Gita and you have studied other spiritual texts. It's not that you are unaware of some of these deeper questions about life that have been asked and the answers that have been given. So a certain amount of knowledge is there within us, but that knowledge is not enough. It's a little bit like you have, say, studied a lot of books about swimming. You know exactly how people swim, or why people, how and why things float on water, and what are the things you need to do in order to swim. So you can have, and that's knowledge really, but that doesn't automatically mean that if you're just thrown into water, you will automatically start swimming. So that's where we are now. So we are kind of knowing the theory about all of this, but that doesn't mean that our knowledge hasn't become ripened yet, hasn't become functional yet. It's like I know all the, I may have memorized all the music sheets, but that doesn't automatically mean that I will be able to start playing an instrument unless I've actually gone and practiced it. So this is kind of the map. As they say sometimes, the map is not the territory. Just because I have the map of Boston doesn't necessarily mean I have seen the entire city. Or you can have a map of the whole world, but still, it's still the map. It's not actually being there. So this is really the map that we are studying right now. So these four kinds of people, those who are either suffering, those who seek knowledge, those who seek things, those who seek stuff, if you like, and those who know the truth, know the deeper truth, but haven't, of course, experienced it yet. So these are the four kinds of people who may turn to God, depending on their tendencies. And then he goes on in the next verse to develop this idea further. Verse 17. Tesham jnani nitya yukta eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnaninotyartham aham sachamama priyaha. Of these, the person of knowledge who is constantly in communion and single-minded in devotion excels. To the person of knowledge, I am very dear indeed, and he is dear to me. So now, what Krishna is saying is, among these four, the last one, the one with knowledge, excels. And that person is dear to me, and I am dear to that person. Now, why? Why would Krishna single out one among these four as the best? And if you see, it's not too difficult to figure out. What do all of these four seek? They are all disappointed, but what do they seek? So the distressed person is seeking freedom from that, whatever is causing him or her that distress. So freedom from suffering. The seeker after knowledge is seeking answers to questions, so seeking knowledge. The seeker after wealth, well, is seeking wealth or seeking things. The person of knowledge, the person who knows the truth, is seeking God or seeking truth. So that's the difference. Among these four, for the first three, God is the means to the goal. The goal is, I need to get rid of my suffering, and God will help me to do it. I need answers to these questions. God will help me get answers to these questions. I need all these things, and God will help me get these things. So all these first three are using God as a means, as an instrument to get them what they want. But the last person is seeking God. And so The last person, the instrument and the goal is one and the same. Whereas for the first three, God is an instrument and what they seek is something different from God. So again, when even the religious people, when we say, oh, I love God, I believe in God, that's okay. To say I love God, I believe in God is fine. But we still need to ask ourselves, do I really want God? And see what answer you get. If we ask our own heart, what do I really want in life? And see whether the answer very likely may not be God. I mean, why would we want God? We need God because God can give us all these things. Well, God is all powerful. God can protect me. God can guide me. God can give me things. So it's not the psychology is not very different from the people we approach who can give us things. There is a ancient Sanskrit verse which says which goes like this. It says that all the qualities attach themselves to the wealthy and the famous. Why? Because the wealthy and the famous people will always have followers. They'll always have people around them. But how many of those people want these wealthy people for their own sake, and how many of these people seek them or want them or hang around them for their wealth? Because oftentimes it is seen that all these big celebrities and the famous people, whether it's their wealth or their fame, whatever it is that makes them come into the public eye, no sooner they are retired or they no longer have that fame or they no longer have wealth, everyone kind of deserts them. Only a few will still stick by, but they no longer have throngs of people around them. And some of these big celebrities who have been interviewed, and many of you are familiar with this, have often said that they may have hundreds of thousands of fans and followers, and yet they are very lonely. They're lonely because they don't know how many of these so-called friends and admirers really love them for who they are, as opposed to what they have or how they can help. So, our love for God, do we love God because God is God, or do we love God because, well, God can give me all these things? So this last category, this person of knowledge, is the one who seeks God for God's sake. And that's considered the higher form of love for God, higher form of bhakti, higher form of devotion. So there is a sakama bhakti, a devotion with desire. So I'm devoted to God, I believe in God, I love God, but I have all these desires and I know that God will help fulfill these desires of mine. So I'm seeking God as a means towards fulfilling some of the desires I have. But when God becomes the goal itself, I see God for God's sake, not for my sake, then that is a higher form of love. And that is what Krishna means here by these adjectives. Nitya Yukta. Nitya Yukta means constantly in communion. When are we constantly in communion? And single-minded devotion is called Eka Bhaktihi. Actually, both of them are connected. Think about it this way. Let's say that when a person, let's say a person is suffering from intense body ache, there's pain all over the body, and then you might take painkillers, you might go to doctors, you might show, and well, nothing can remove that pain immediately unless they give you such a maybe morphine or something and just put you to sleep. Other than that, the pain is going to be there. Um, and eventually it might reduce with proper medication and pain management. But as long as, and especially if that pain is powerful, then you are in constant communion with your pain, no matter whatever it is that you're doing. And it's not really a devotion to pain, but really you're single-minded towards it. So you still have your breakfast, lunch, dinner, you still meet with friends, still you answer phones, you still do your emails, you go for work, you do all the things that you do, but not for once you are able to forget that pain, because it's there with you all the time. And if that more intense the pain, the less important everything else becomes. And you realize the pain. By realize, I mean, you can say by realize, I use the word realize in the sense that making something real. So if there is a lot of pain in my body, then that pain is very real. Oftentimes, it becomes more real than everything else, because the first thing I want is, can I find a way to get rid of this pain? Because unless I do that, I'm not able to enjoy anything else. So my priority list will change, because the pain is so intense. The topmost will be removal of this pain, because that's top, because it's a single-minded communion to that pain. Now that's just an example. Now replace that with the awareness of the presence of God, or love for God, or that intense longing for God. Now if that's constantly present in my consciousness, the way a pain would be present for someone who is, say, it doesn't really have to be an entire body pain. It could be just a strong toothache. That's enough to fill our whole mind with that pain. So when love for God, that intense longing for the Spirit, fills my heart to such an extent, then that I'm in constantly communion with it, everything else becomes less real, less important. And that is why such a person is very dear, because when we speak about being dear, we always think about, well, there are two entities and they are very dear to each other. But here, the divine being is our own true self, the Atma. That is why the Gita says God dwells in the hearts of all of us. So our own true self, the Atman, that's who the divine is. And because that's the divine, and who doesn't love themselves? In fact, there is this famous passage in the Upanishads which says that whatever is dear to us in this world is dear not for that thing's sake, but for our own sake. And it gives a lot of examples. It's like a father is not dear for the father's sake, but my own sake. A mother is not dear for my mother's sake, for my own sake. A child is not dear for the child's sake, but my own sake, and so on. And then finally, everything in this world is not dear to us. We don't like it. We don't love it for its sake, but our own sake. And now this might seem to be a profoundly cynical way of looking at things, like it just makes us profoundly selfish, everything for my own sake. So even though it's not in a very grossly selfish way, but in a very subtle way, things will not be relevant to us, meaningful to us, unless they were connected to us in some way, right? So if I love my friend, well, I love my friend because that's my friend, right? I mean, there are millions of people in the world. And I mean, in a general way, I might love all humanity. But among all these people, there are certain people I love specially, more than everyone, And the reason I love them more is because they are connected with me in some way. Think about it this way. When someone dear to us, say, is leaving or going to a far off place. Nowadays, olden days, someone going to a far off place, people would cry and we will go to the railroad station and there'll be a lot of tears shed. Because oftentimes, even before telecommunication, if a person goes, really, you don't hear from them until you see them again. And then when the post started, then at least you could get a letter occasionally. And then now with emails and FaceTime and Skype and all kinds of things, very few people shed tears now because you kind of are in, at least in a virtual way, in touch with people, even those who are very far away. But when people die, for instance, well, you can't send any emails, nothing works there. And so we cry. When someone dear to us goes away, we cry. And that's a very natural human reaction. We just step back a little bit. And then, although that's not when you're actually crying, that's not the time to ask yourself this question. But now when we are not crying, we can ask this question and say, when people cry, who are they crying for? Say someone who has been, say, on a deathbed, intense physical suffering, and then this person passes away, and then everyone around cries. Who are they crying for? In one sense, this person who was in this suffering body, this body which was bringing so much pain, is really become free from that pain. And for all we know, this person is in a much better place, in some higher loka, maybe with God, whatever our belief system is. And if we believe that, and as I sometimes say that, even those of us who believe that, well, after death, I'll go to heaven and be with the Lord. And if some good person dies, shouldn't it be a day of time of celebration? Oh, this person is with the Lord, he is happy with the Lord. Yet we cry. And even if we don't want to die quickly either, even if we believe that I'm going to be with the Lord, we are in no hurry to be with the Lord. So we don't mind suffering and things which are terrible here to the possible heavenly joys. Because belief is one thing, but how much of us truly, it's still a mystery. It's like, yeah, I believe everything is going to be fine. I'm not sure. So let me hold on to something which I'm aware of than of something which I'm not yet sure about. So this is something that we need to ask. So who are we crying for? And oftentimes we will see that a dispassionate understanding of this phenomenon is that really we are crying for ourselves. Because this person who I related with in whatever way was so close to me brought some meaning to my life. And now this person's disappearance is just gone from my life. I'm never going to be able to see this person again. Has left a void in my heart. So I'm the one who is suffering. And I'm grieving over my suffering. I might think like, oh, I'm mourning for that person. I'm crying for the person who has gone. But really, we are crying for ourselves. Because so many people die in this world. Every moment someone is dying. We don't cry for them. Because, someone unknown somewhere who's not really adding any meaning to my life. So that person's going really doesn't deprive me of anything. But someone who was close to me brought some meaning, artha, to my life. So swartha, the word for selfishness in Sanskrit is swartha, swarthi. And now the word selfish really has a very negative connotation to it. But if you kind of go to the literal meaning of it, swa arthi, swa means self. arthi, it brought meaning to the self. And so in that kind of a subtle way, without any negative connotation attached to it, there is this level of selfishness that things affect us only insofar as they are connected with us. If they are not connected, they won't affect us. So everything that is dear to us, everything that makes sense to us is because it is connected with me. So that has to be questioned here. And that me, the real me, is God. So everyone loves themselves. And insofar as we love things around us, people and things around us, that love extends insofar as they add some meaning to me, to my life, to my true self. And so the primary object of our love is the self, the Atman. And that Atman is one with God. And that is why Krishna says, to this person I am very dear, the Atman, and that person is dear to me, because the Atman and this person are one and the same. So this statement should not be construed to mean, well, God is being partial among all these four categories. God only loves a few people and doesn't love other people. So this is the way it needs to be understood. And then, of course, which we will see next time, you can see verse 18. All of these are indeed noble. So he says, of course, I love them all, but the reason this last category of the one person who seeks God is especially dear for this reason. So we will continue this discussion when we meet next Wednesday. But before we close, if you have any comments, questions about what we have seen today.
Could you please kindly, Swami, clarify for me, people who seeking wealth? So you told that it's, you call it, I can understand it's seeking meaning. So is it still a attachment to the things? Still? Is it still seeking meaning? Still means I'm attached to things? Meaning is things? Because meaning could be just a call for higher life, right? It's not necessarily attachment to gross things.
No, the thing is this. Why are we seeking meaning? Because we somehow feel that if I already, everything was completely meaningful to me, I wouldn't be seeking anything. So clearly there is some kind of a void. There is a lot of fulfillment in the heart, but there are a lot of other things in which we're not fulfilled. So then we say, well, how can I fill that void in my heart? Now, different people have different ideas about what will fill that void. So some people might feel, well, if I can earn a lot of money, then all my problems will be solved. Some people feel that if I get answers to all these questions, then I will be at peace. Some people feel that all these suffering, once the suffering goes away, I'll be at peace. So that's why people seek different things. So seeking meaning itself is what everyone is doing. But what are they exactly doing to find that meaning? That is where people differ from one another.
I see. Yeah. And it could be just in one person combined different part of this classifications. Somebody wants to be free from suffering, and also he wants some knowledge. So it could be just some combination of this 1, 2, 3, 4 things you told.
Oh, sure. Everything there is a combination. Now, people are very few people are single-minded. We always have a bunch of goals, but there'll be also a list of priorities. So which is like first, it's like a to-do list. Like, oh yeah, I need to do these 10 things, but this is thing I need to do first, then the second. So that's what we are.
Thank you. I understand.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hi. My question was, you were talking about how the wise person seeks God in a way that's not instrumental. It's somewhat in the way of how a friend, you try to figure out if a friend seeks you for your wealth or for your own sake. I didn't quite understand what it would mean to seek someone for their own sake, because yes, you can seek them for their wealth, and that's very obviously different, but then you can seek them for their knowledge or for how they treat other people. And I was just wondering, what is it to seek someone for their own sake?
Again, that seeking that itself will bring meaning, will add meaning to my life. It's sometimes like, and this is a little bit of a similar example. Let's say someone now is, say, a physician who has done a medical school and can make a decent living as a result of it. But this person is really not, that work doesn't interest this person. And this person says, I really want to be an artist. Art really kind of, it's a lot of meaningful to me. But artists, well, unless you really become famous like Picasso or something, then you might make a lot of money. But so this person might be doing art and really maybe really living in poverty, may not have a good place to stay, maybe really suffering in money. But that's adding meaning. So this person seeks art, you could say, for art's sake, because that's add meaning. Although from a different perspective, this person could be suffering, but that suffering has become inconsequential because the meaning that art brings. So in a way you could say this person is seeking art for art's sake. Now this is not a perfect example, but just to show that from a different perspective, this might seem to be a bad choice. But for this person, this is my life. So exactly in the same way, there are people who just like spiritual life is the only thing for me. And obviously, not everyone can appreciate that ideal. Some people like, well, don't you want to do something in life? Just like pray and meditate, is that all? Are you crazy? Now, in the eyes of other people, that might seem crazy, but not for this person, for whom that has become a full, meaningful life. We see that in the life of Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, many of these great saints. A lot of people during their lifetime thought they were not normal. They were crazy. Like, what is this God all the time? So that's how it is.
Yeah, I think with respect to this, even we should not confuse about people who don't seek anything. For example, like we don't turn to God.
Everybody seeks something.
We don't turn to God at all. So if they are not dear to God, because in this categories it said that people who turn to God for not for any earth or common, then they are dear to God. So people who don't even turn to God at all, are they dear or not?
No, again, as I said, the moment you think of God like someone sitting there and then say, oh, only few people are dear to that God and others are not, it doesn't work that way. So if you see God as your true self, then those people who don't seek the true self, they are seeking something else. They have to kind of keep on going in this circle of relative existence. And so they are going to continue to suffer. So it's not that they are not dear to God. God is not dear to them either. So they are not seeking the self, and so they are the veil that is separating them from their own self is still strong, and they are not doing anything to break it. So that they are not dear to God is not casting aspersions of God as seeing some third person sitting up above the clouds, but it's about that they are not seeking to know their own true self. That's the thing. Yeah, the moment you kind of look at it in a very dualistic way, then we are in trouble. Then it comes like this angry, partial God who has a few chosen favorite people around. Doesn't work that way. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, so when we meet next Wednesday, we will begin with verse 18. So this idea will continue. As I said, and Srikant, to some extent your question will be answered in the next verse 18 when he says, all of these are indeed noble. So even when all these little differentiation is made, that the fourth category is dear, but he does have a good things to say about all the four, as opposed to the others who don't even turn to God. So we will discuss it next week. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. We bow down to Ramakrishna and Sharada Devi. So on Sunday, our subject will be Brahmananda, life and message. His birthday comes in the following week, and so we'll take a look at his life and teachings. He was a brother disciple of Vivekananda, one of the dear disciples of Ramakrishna himself, and his book called The Eternal Companion is very helpful for all those who practice japa and meditation. Some very practical tips helpful. So we'll take a look at that, which will be very helpful. That will be next Sunday. Next Wednesday, we'll continue with the study of the Gita. And Saturday and Tuesday, our Arati also will continue as usual at 6 o'clock. So you're welcome for all of these programs. We'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3 of your books. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.